Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Aravind. I'm a partner at EY, and I'm the moderator for this session, what we are having now. I'll just give a quick context to the whole panel discussion today. It's a very, very important and pertinent topic, what we have, leadership by example. So we are living in a time where the very definition of productivity is being reimagined. It's no longer about the efficiency or the output you are bringing on the table, but about the purpose, the alignment, the well-being, and the sustainability. So this change isn't happening in isolation, rather being driven from the top. And that's the reason we are having esteemed panel today. And even when you look at the whole leadership angle, right? So there are multiple facets to it, right? And one of them is, of course, driving the productivity with purpose. And that's something which all of us really need to look at it. So we are going to really listen to the real stories of tough calls taken at workplace, of things unlearned, and the moments under pressure that really shaped the organizational culture. So that's something which is very, very critical as well. And all of us have extreme pressure to deliver, of course, deliver more with less. And how exactly we really shape the organization to drive the productivity becomes again a timely as well as essential discussion what we need to really have. Today on the panel, we have a very power-packed guest. So they have a wealth of experience and again, ranging from fast-growing startups to global enterprises. So they will talk about their stories and their experiences to really lead this whole team's morale, accountability, how to really drive purpose, and what really drives the whole productivity angle, because there are multiple angles to it. As of course, as you lead any organization, we just need to deliver the results as well. So to deliver the results, we need to really have the right team culture and the right setup. So again, I was just going through some of these leadership lessons, again, very regularly. And there is a very nice saying. When you look at the leadership culture, it is nothing but the shadow of the leaders. How exactly your leaders behave, that's how the team follows. And if you have the right leadership qualities, that's when you can really drive a very high-performing and purpose-driven organization. And that's what we are going to really explore during today's discussion. And I think with this, please join me in welcoming our great panelists. I'll just start from my left. So we have Mr. Dhruv Gupta. So he's a serial entrepreneur with, of course, very great academics. And he's the co-founder at the Orange Health Labs. He has very interesting perspective on the leadership. I think we will love to hear from him. Then we have Mrs. Sujatha Narayan. She's the India leader for Wabtec Corporation. It's very important for us to even hear her perspective because when you have a very matured global organization, how should we really drive the purpose? Because the purpose is set long back. Perhaps you will have more refreshments to this or updates to this whole purpose. How do you really ensure that the team today would follow the same purpose and the culture, yet being a global corporation, right? So I think her perspectives will be very, very useful for us to keep in mind and practice as well. Then we have Mr. Shajai Jacob. He's the MD and CEO of ANACITY Group. He brings on the technological angle to the whole purpose and driven. And let's hear from him as to how exactly he would really love to look at the whole leadership angle and deliver the results. Yet, then we have Vinay Kumar Swamy. So he's heading Pearson India. As you're aware, Pearson is basically in the education sector. It's a giant over there. He has very interesting perspective about the learning and development and how exactly the multinationals or any corporations today should adopt learning as part of their core syllabus, even in the leadership matters. So I think let's hear from him as well, and it will be a very interesting session as well for us. So the way that we have formulated the whole discussion is that we have segregated into two segments. The first segment is all about setting the context, looking at 4 elements of the leadership: the people, the purpose, the progress, and the culture. And the whole discussion will be around 4 themes again: leadership by example, and then we have very important aspect of CEO and HR collaboration, and how exactly the HR leaders should push CEOs to get the right outcome in a more meaningful manner. The third aspect is about culture as a productivity driver. So at the end of the day, we really need to see results as well. So what kind of culture we need to really set to get the right culture is something which we are going to explore. The last one is more about the future. So how do we build future-ready leaders in the organization? So only when we have layers of leadership, that's when we will have growth, and that's when we will set the culture as well. So whole discussion points will be around these 4 themes, and then we will really explore as to what we need to really take home from this particular discussion. And yes, I'm actually excited to have all of you, and it's a great pleasure. And I think to start with, let's just go to Shajai. As a leader, so what are the behavioral aspects which you consciously model to ensure your team's productivity and, of course, the morale as well? And if you can just share some of the real life experiences where your personal behavior, specifically under any pressurous situation, had a great impact on the performance of your team.
Aravind, I think my responses are going to be based on my last 2 assignments. One which I was leading the ANACITY business in the Middle East, based in Dubai, and one now which was more phygital business, and now which is leading the tech outfit, which is more a pure digital business. So you'll have a sort of a flavor of both, and leading a varied assortment of teams, both Indian and multinational and multi-ethnic. Based in the Middle East. So I think, when I look at an organization, I look at an organization more like a family, because, and I think Dhruv was also very kind enough to explain it outside when we were having this chat, Dhruv, that, we're all emotional human beings, and I think a family operates in a sort of an emotional manner, very passionate about it. The head of the family is who or what sets the culture and the tone and the pace for the family, and that's where the full family looks up. So I think for a leader of a company, I think it's the embodiment of his own work ethics, the embodiment of the hard work, the productivity that he sets in, which is then followed by the rest of the firm. That's the first and foremost, right? So the entire organization, or at least most of it, then tries to emulate and tries to become at least part of what they are. And I think a lot of leadership, 65%, 75% of the values and leadership that people learn through the ranks as they grow up, they try to embody what their leaders have been, right? So I think that's what the biggest is. And I think the other things are about ethics, it's about focus, it's about setting a mission, a vision, and all of that, right? But most importantly, it's about every leader is today on a stage, and what he embodies, what he demonstrates is what the rest of the organization will follow. So if you have someone who's slack, you'll get an organization which is similar, right? And this happens at every level of leadership, right? That's why you have strong team leaders, and you have certainly strong teams, and you definitely have the diametrically opposite. One of the personal examples that I have is that you need to back your teams, and you need to back your teams to the crests. Celebrating success, anyone can do, and I think it's the easiest thing to do, but it's celebrating the weakness, celebrating when you're in a trough, celebrating or actually defending your teams in the midst of adversity and pressure. So 2024 Q4, as you know, toughest quarter, revenue pressures are high, We were chasing a multi-million-dollar contract last year, and our head of sales was leading it. She took some initiatives on her own without consulting me or some of the other pricing guys, and we lost the contract. The board was livid because it was sort of the difference between making our numbers and not. But I think what really worked, and I'll come to it in a minute, for in our favor was that me backing her up and of course having a chat with her as to what worked and what didn't, and how she should continue the engagement with the same client without stepping down, you know. And true to nature, she brought the client back this year. So I think it's all about recognizing that people take initiatives, give them accountability, don't micromanage. But when they take initiatives, sometimes, you know, when they take a risk, they fail. But at least they've taken that risk. I mean, you have someone who's a risk taker out there. And I think it's important to back someone who's taken risk for the benefit of the organization, of course. Therefore, those are, I believe, some of the values that I would embody.
Great answer. I think that's a great start to the panel discussion as well. You spoke nicely about the people. I think the culture, what you really build. I think it's the celebrating the team's success or the failure and making sure that they're part of the family. I think that's a great point of view. I think it goes really well with the whole leadership qualities as well. Thank you so much for that comment. It's a great start. Sujatha, when you look at the productivity, right? How do you ensure that the productivity in your organization is not just about the output or the efficiency, but it's more of, again, driving everything with a purpose, the sense of purpose, right? So as a CEO, so what you had to really unlearn a particular, let's say, personal behavior, because which was really impacting the productivity rather than helping it. So how exactly you encountered this particular aspect?
Sure, thanks Aravind, that's a great question. When we talk about productivity, there's a difference between productivity and efficiency, right? Just getting an amount of work done in a given period of time is efficiency. To me, productivity is about how do you maximally extract the potential of your human capital. Yeah. Right? In order to do that, I think we as human beings, and I find over my career of 20 plus years, year after year, if you want to drive an organization that is very productive, they have to have a sense of purpose. So to me, it's not productivity versus purpose. It's more about the fact that if you don't have a sense of purpose, however big or small, productivity will suffer, right? So one of the things that I look at as my job as the head of an organization, I break it into 3 parts, right? The first is really understanding the business, the external and internal environment, and setting the vision and the strategy of the organization. The second part, strategy is not enough, right? The second part is how do you create an organization, processes, systems, and infrastructure for world-class execution. And the third part of my job that is equally critical is how do you take care of the people, right? So when we talk about productivity, typically we're thinking the middle bucket and how do you really execute well and how do you make sure you meet your numbers and satisfy your customers. But I have spent a lot of my time in the first part, which is how do I give the organization a sense of purpose? I want to give you a couple of examples. The more recent example is in 2020, just before COVID hit, I was in the US, part of the global investor meet, and my CEO had asked me to address our global investors and analysts to talk about the future of India for Wabtec. And we had set what we called a $1 billion vision, right? And we were about 700 plus at that time, and we said within the next 5 years, by 2025, we should be a $1 billion enterprise. Now it's just a number, but the point is that, I mean, we made the presentation well received, and then the choice was to come back and then it was business as usual, but we didn't do it that way. We took that $1 billion vision and just made it the singular purpose of every single person in the organization. Tomorrow if you meet somebody at Wabtec, hopefully not, but let's say you're interviewing somebody for a job and you ask them what's the purpose of Wabtec India, and I am certain they will say that we're going to be a $1 billion enterprise. So whether we're going to get there, that's the good news, by end of this year in rupee term and then by next year in dollar term. But the point is that you have everybody rallied around that one purpose and vision, and that goes a long way. The second quick example is when I joined Wabtec as the MD of Fevle Transport, which was a part of Wabtec in India. Every year we would have what was called the enterprise theme, right? One year it was customer centricity, it was quality, etc., etc. It's really interesting what happened, and then you just don't announce it, right? You communicate the heck out of it. So whether it's in employee all hands, when I visit the sites, the offices, one-on-one meetings, target groups, the blogs I write to the organization, it will always talk about that. It will start and finish with that. So you have the vision, you communicate it, and you make it what it's all about. And I find that we have just done some magical things with that sense of purpose. Growing almost $250 million in a period of 5 years, given the last 5 years with COVID, hyperinflation, supply chain challenges, Russia-Ukraine war, cyber incidents, strikes. I mean, it's just incredible in this tumultuous period we've managed to get there. And I think that sense of purpose, how we percolated that through the organization, how we communicated that has made a huge difference. Coming to the second part of your question on what have I had to unlearn, that's a really good question, because when you head a subsidiary or a region for a multinational, one of the things that's expected from you is you need to know everything that's going on, right? Now, the only way you get to know everything that's going on is you're reviewing everything that's going on. And what are you doing in the process? Your human capital is sitting and making presentations to you. Hours and hours of work is just going in reviewing things with you because you just have to know it. You may never get asked it, but you have to know it. So one of the things I've consciously done in the last 2 jobs that I've had is the first thing I do is I come in and I map my organization, all the businesses, functions. I spend the first 3 months evaluating where they are with respect to where they need to be or where they potentially could be. And there'll be a bunch of greens, there'll be some yellows and reds, and I just focus initially on the red. So, and I do this on an everyday basis. I'm not, for example, we were talking about our diesel locomotive factory in Bihar, run by an outstanding team, right? I don't review them at all, right? I know what's going on, I don't review. But there are parts of the organization that are struggling. There are future challenges in terms of business gaps coming up, and I focus on that. So I end up having all the difficult problems in the company. Yeah. It makes my job really hard. But I had to unlearn that because there is a tendency, especially as you come through your career, and knowledge is power, right? Just knowing everything makes you sound like the smartest person in the room. So there are multiple times my CEO will ask me, hey, what's going on with this? And I'll say, I don't know. I know it's going well. I'll get back to you. It's hard. It takes courage because you feel weaker when you don't have knowledge. But that's the key thing that I've had to unlearn is you don't have to know everything. You don't have to review everything. And for sure, don't make your job about taking people's time and just reviews, right? Because they lose a lot of precious time in the process.
That's a great answer. I think you need to have guts to say that, okay, fine, I just don't know, but I'll just come back. And having this habit of unlearning things and then relearning, I think it's a great sign of a leader. I think, thank you so much for that answer. I think Shajai has to
So Sujatha, I completely agree with you on that. But, I have a perspective to unlearning things too. Look, I've come down, I've grown through the ranks of functional leadership. And my twin motto at that point of time was quality and precision of delivery, right? Now, as a leader at this point of time, I think my innate focus on delivering, the perfection of quality sometimes hampers productivity. And that is what I've had to really unlearn. And that for me has been really tough, right? Because it's as simple as reviewing an RFP, which is going out to a large client and I see, stuff over there in that RFP, or it's as simple as, looking at client responses or even what stuff goes out to the board. But at the same time, looking at the precision of delivery, I think that's what is more important rather than, focusing on perfection. So I have now tried to embody that perfection that, okay, even if it's not 100% perfect, let it go, because it really won't really hurt us. But if it's not there on time, it will. So, and that's my personal journey at this point of time to unlearn that quality and perfection.
I couldn't agree more. I think, in fact, even I had to unlearn that as well. So I can completely agree with you on that. So now, yes, I think we heard two great stories on people and the productivity, the purpose, sorry. So now, when you look at the startup environment, right? So it's always fast moving. So we have Dhruv. So I think, Dhruv, how do you really balance the urgency of fast growth with the need to really build a sustainable and people first productivity practices? So, how do you really ensure the team's accountability without really micromanaging in a very fast growing setup like yours? So, really like to hear your views on this.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Aravind. So, one thing that I want to say out at the outset is that building a startup is like running a marathon, not a sprint. I think that's very important because, from the outside, we see this thing that, oh, startups are growing very fast. But you need to manage it at a speed that you don't burn out, right? Because it's a long journey. You're potentially building an intergenerational institution. If that's your view, then you have to build with a view of sustainability, right? Sustainability of productivity, of energy, of people coming in every day to actually be recharged and actually do the work. So a few fundamental facets that we pay attention to as we're building the organization and driving growth, right? One is hiring culturally aligned people. Now, at every stage for any sector, for company in any sector, you have to hire people who are aligned to the nature of the work and to the stage of the company. And each company has its own different values. We heard from these two folks about what they value in their organization, what is the stage of their organization. As Sujatha was talking about the scale of the revenue of where they are versus where we were 5 years ago. We were an idea, right? We were at zero. Today, we've made some progress. So it's very important to hire people. So in a startup environment, for example, right? One of the core cultural facets is you need to hire people with, for example, high agency and comfort with ambiguity, right? Because you're figuring stuff out. We want to grow. We want to go, let's say we want to grow 10x in the next 5 years, whatever that number may be. How we're going to get there, we don't exactly know. We have some path to it. So you want a team who's comfortable with that. But in a more mature organization, there's a very clear path. Here is how we're going to grow. Here is what are the things we need to do. So I think one is that, right? The other is sort of building a culture of R&R. And that's not reward and recognition, actually it's rest and recovery, right? Is that building a startup is like building a wall, right? And the more bricks you lay, the better you do. But you want to make sure the foundations are strong. So you want people, and like I said, it's a marathon. You want people to come in on a daily basis, be excited about what they're doing, and be recovered. So we respect people's downtime. Yes, we're all working hard. We're all giving in, more hours than maybe in a typical scenario. But we ensure that we give people downtime, or when people want downtime, whether that's vacation time, weekends, whatever, because we all sort of have our personal lives to also handle. And this typically starts from the top. Both me and my co-founder, we both have families. We both have lives outside of work as well. We like to travel when we can. So we try to ensure that we do what we want to do. And as a result, it sort of embodies and empowers our leaders, our managers, and, down to everyone across the organization to do that, right? The other thing is, to enable productivity, you need to have empowered people and systems. We are now an organization with about 1,700 people across in 4 cities, right? It's very hard for us to be everywhere. It's very hard for our leaders to make decisions everywhere. So the only way you can actually do that is fundamentally build the right processes and have potentially dashboards or data available for people to make decisions. I'll give you an example. We have a large team of phlebotomists, right? We provide, diagnostic services at home and now through physical centers as well. So we have a large on-ground team. Now each hub in every area have these people, what we call as hub managers. They are senior phlebotomists who basically manage the hub. They actually have data for what their team is doing, which orders they have, which locations they are at, where they are live. And so it allows them to make decisions on the go. Right now, Otherwise, they would be sort of like calling people, and all of that hampers productivity, right? So these couple of things. And the last thing I want to touch upon is to grow fast, you have to do things outside the normal, which means you have to run experiments, which by definition mean some of which will fail. So you have to have a culture which is okay to fail fast. A culture which normalizes some failure, which normalizes experimentation, let me say, which allows for failure, and which, as a result, you don't feel bad when you fail. And so, as founders, for example, we share some of the things that we've tried, and some which have succeeded, some which have failed. But what we focus on in failure is what did we learn from this? So these are sort of four assets that sort of aspects that we focus on in terms of driving productivity. In terms of micromanagement, look, I actually think of micromanagement as a symptom of lack of clarity and trust in an organization. So few things that we try to do is, one, as an organization, you need to provide clarity across the organization. Like she was saying, the one rally cry for them was, we want to be $1 billion company. For us, the way we think about it is that what are the metrics that we're going after? What are the few metrics that the whole company is rallying behind? We spend a lot of time actually debating that. And once it's clear, communicating that across the organization. Right? So everyone knows in each team that this is the number that we're going after. Here is what we care about as an organization. So what am I doing to fundamentally contribute towards this? The other is actually having capable people. Right? And this, I mean, it sounds a little contrite, but it's very important that, you trust people when they're capable to do things. And what we've seen is typically, it's not that people don't have capability, it is that they're capable in certain functions, in certain aspects. So it's about finding the right place for them, whether that is in the organization, outside the organization. If we tend to have open discussions around this with people in one-on-one when required, that, hey, look, you're not fitting into this role, maybe another role is better. And we've had people move across organizations and excel in those new roles, or actually move out of the company. We're okay with that. We're okay to help people move into roles that are better aligned for them. The third thing that we do for this, once you have the right metrics in place and the right people in place, is regular reviews. We have a culture of, and we actually bought this from Amazon. It's called a WBS, a weekly business review, where we have people from across the organization, like 10 or 12 of our core leaders across the organization, present. What we do is, there are no decks. It's an Excel sheet. The whole organization spends an hour only on that thing. So each leader probably has 5-7 minutes to present, whether that's revenue, whether that's operations, whether that's product, engineering. Everyone comes in and talks about, hey, here are the metrics, here's what's going on. And in that, what we focus on actually is on input metrics. So one of the things, while we're figuring out the output metrics, saying the organization wants to hit this kind of revenue, this kind of margin, this kind of customer base, these sort of quality metrics as a company, we try to focus on saying that, okay, to get that output, what exactly is the input? So we spend a lot of time also on figuring out the input metrics that go into creating those outputs. And on a weekly basis, we focus on the input, because the output is actually a lagging metric, right? Revenue, you only find out at the end of the month or at the end of the quarter, right? But how many, for example, for salespeople, maybe, okay, how many target meetings did you do? What is the conversion funnel like? Focusing on the smaller metrics in there, because that's what you can action on a daily basis. It's hard to be obsessed about the output metric on a daily basis versus the input metric, and saying, what will actually drive the output. And then sometimes you might find the input metrics aren't correct, so you tweak those. So we're constantly in this learning mode of saying, okay, what is it that we need to keep focusing on doing on a daily basis to drive the right output. So I would say these are the sort of the facets that we focus on to avoid micromanagement.
Great, excellent. I think we heard great insights. So first, again, we learned as to how we really need to scale responsibly. It is not about scaling fast. I think that's the core, I would say, the area of focus as far as the foundry is concerned. I think that's a beautiful answer from your side. Now, when you look at the investor expectation, I think that's something which, again, keeps bothering me as well. How do you ensure, as a leader, basically on the investor expectation, yet deliver with purpose and keep the team going and retain people and have a long-term sustainable business model. So all these parameters go hand in hand. But what is your take on this?
You know, the thread tying all of this together is actually the founders and the leadership.
Yes.
Right. Investor expectations are set by the company, which is fundamentally set by the founders and the leadership. So as founders and leaders, you have to set the right expectations. You know, for example, Sujatha even talked about, like, you know, she's reporting to her CEO, who is kind of the investor in this case, right? And she set the expectation saying, look, we will be $1 billion in 5 years' time. Now, similarly, you have to set the right expectations as an organization, which you believe you can actually deliver on. And you know, the higher your say-do ratio, the more your credibility, the more investors, customers, partners, employees trust you. The more confidence builds in your organization, internally and externally. So I think this is a very important factor that we've had. Look, I've spent many years in the startup ecosystem building companies, and over time, this is what I fundamentally realized, that you know, the market, I was saying you earlier, right? The market in the short term is a voting machine, but in the long term is a weighing machine. Warren Buffett says this actually. Fundamentally, it drives down to what kind of weight are you building as an organization, right? Short term doesn't matter. What matters is over the next couple of years, 5 years, 10 years, right? Where are you heading, and are you thinking about that as you're building this out? Every quarter matters, but there is life beyond the quarter as well, you know, to what Shajai also shared, right? That it's okay, you will have those ups and downs, but are you building for the long term? So one thing that we try to do when we're bringing on investors, when we're bringing on employees, is align them with the reality of how we think about the organization, with the reality of our expectations, with the reality of what we're doing, right? And every organization is different. You know, there are organizations that you'll hear about, startups specifically, some who deliver, who promise and potentially deliver on incredible growth, some who take a little bit longer. You have to know your nature, right? It's dependent on the nature of the company, the founders, the sector that you're in, right? Some sectors allow for faster growth, some sectors don't. So you have to recognize the reality of these situations and then sort of speak the truth. I think that's very important, because when you do that, it allows for complete clarity across the ecosystem.
Great answer, great answer. So now, from all of you, I think all three, we learned that leadership is not about just decision making. It's about setting the right culture. Now we have Vinay. He's from the education sector. He has a very interesting journey as well. Although he's a very strong finance professional, his family is basically a very hardcore educationalist. So now when you look at the answers from the three panelists, so where we learned more about setting the right culture, right? How do you translate the culture into, let's say, the day-to-day productivity and the progress practices? And even as a leader, in the world where the companies are giving a lot more focus on the learning and development aspects, right? And you're also coming from the educational sector. How do you ensure that you keep yourself agile as a leader and you focus on the growth of the organization?
Thanks. I think many of the questions, they have answered most of the points that I wanted to talk about, but let me reflect back a few of those things. We help people realize the life that they imagine through learning. That's the purpose of my organization. When I say help realize, imagine life, it looks complicated, but each one of us have our own life imagination, right? So in Pearson, we believe learning is not a stage. It's a journey of lifelong journey for us. And that's where we call ourselves a learning company, not an education company. We're not a publisher. When we are talking about it, it's not the learners who are, I mean, of course, we have customers or, you know, the paying customers who are my learners, but also internally, right? That's the most important one. And I strongly believe I do three simple things that everybody spoke about, but yet very powerful. I think communication of the purpose relentlessly, every meeting, every opportunity we get, we start with what is the purpose of this organization? Why are we here? What are we trying to do? I keep getting recommendations to create content. We get recommendations for creating assessments. We get recommendations from the teams. The only first question we ask them in the first slide is, what is the purpose? Are you solving that purpose? Then let's hear from there. If you're addressing that challenge, if you're addressing the purpose of the organization, how? And then comes what? Okay, that's how we have kind of built the culture. And we keep repeatedly, relentlessly keep communicating about it. The second one is, and I strongly believe this, is modeling the learner-centric approach. When I say modeling learner-centric approach, I am in between the learners. I take feedbacks from the learners. I take feedback from the educators. I take feedbacks from the institutions or enterprises. And only then you will be able to really address what the challenge that they are looking at. And it applies to all of us in this one, right? At the same time, I also keep going to the last mile person in the organization to understand how can I better his working in the organization. And the last one is, I think both of you spoke, Sujatha and Dhruv, I call it a little bit differently, intelligent failure. We do definitely help encourage my teams to experiment. We do create new products. And when we ask them, we don't just accept the opportunity or the product ideas that come up front. We ask them to go back a couple of times and ask them, do they think this is the best that they can do from that product? Most of the time it's about, when the first iteration comes, it's only 20-30%. But then now we have kind of come to a situation where the first or the second one, they're almost 80%. And the only question we ask each of us is this the best that they can do? And is it solving the purpose? The answer is yes, we go ahead with that. And I think we have seen some great success. Otherwise, we would not have been here for last 30 years, helping the learners to imagine their life through learning.
Great. Can you share your personal experience as well? I think you come from a finance background. Now you're heading Pearson India. So
Right.
what are the leadership changes you had to make personally to lead such a global organization in India?
I honestly term that as the unexpected journey in my career. I started as a chartered accountant. I was in a consulting. And then I thought, typically, right, when you're at the age of 22, when you qualified and you don't have anything on your back, I felt I have conquered the world. I want to start my own organization. And then I realized setting up an office is not as easy as what it looked. Dhruv, you would have seen this multiple times, and I've seen that. From cleaning your own desk to bringing your own coffees.
I don't encourage it.
Yeah, but then learned a lot for about 7-8 years. And then I said I have done lots. I worked with some big corporates everywhere, and then I kind of decided, let me go and explore something in the corporate world. And I became a head of finance for one of my clients. I said, I am the head of finance. I know everything. But then I soon realized there's a lot more to learn. It's not just the taxation, it's not just the accounting. And I kept learning mergers, acquisitions. In fact, I ended up doing QMS audits. I became a management representative. I kind of learned the processes, not just the finance process, but actually the business process, IT process. And then I joined Pearson, which is a large organization compared to where I was. And then I realized, I know everything, but then honestly, guys, I still had a lot to learn, to navigate, to manage with the listed companies, so on and so forth. And 3 years back, when they offered me this role, I said, am I ready? That was the first question I asked. And I told my HR head that I don't think so I'm yet ready. They said, no, you're ready because you're able to learn, you're agile, and you will navigate through it. So that was the only thing that kept me pushing to keep learning, keep skilling. There were a lot of things that I did not know. For example, PR, I did not know comms, I did not know branding, I did not know many of those things. But I could touch upon most of those things. But now I've kind of learned, and I still continue to learn, Aravind.
Great. I think that shows a clear, thing in which I think the people should be aware of?
Sure, Aravind, and I think this is a really important question, especially for an American multinational. Because for those who have worked for American multinationals, you know we're obsessed with headcount and how you keep it as low as possible. It drives me crazy because in India it doesn't matter because the cost of headcount is so low, but they still do that. So people do work really hard. Work-life balance is a hard conversation. People do work really hard. So I think of my role and my leadership role to do a few things. One is, I think our job is to make sure we understand the business well enough to prioritize. Because the temptation to kind of throw all the darts in the board to hit the bullseye is very high when you don't have clarity. I think Dhruv was talking about that before. So understanding the business, making sure we're clear about what we want to do. We're selective. So there are a bunch of things we don't do so that with the same people, we're not stretching them. But they still work really hard. Of course, fair compensation is key, but I also know that employees are never satisfied with whatever you pay them because that's the world we live in. We need money. What we have done, which has been very successful in the last 7 years, is rolled out, in this case, an R&R, which is rewards and recognition. But this is different from giving out awards at the end of the quarter or doing an annual event and giving out, because you touch very few people that way. We launched something called accolades, and essentially what this is everyday reward and recognition. So everybody in the company can actually give out these awards to everybody else in the company. It's a beautiful system. I'm so evangelical about it because now you have people appreciating each other, and you think that, oh my God, you've got to spend too much money, but they never spend the budget because people are busy and you mature, right, with time. So, and we've got systems where we've got like a star award, which is, you know, a pretty significant thing that usually bosses give out. Then you've got spot awards, people give each other, the cross-functional team, and then you've got a thank you note. So you will see a dashboard every day where continuously people are recognizing each other. And I think that's very motivating. And we find people talk about it when they come to the end of the review saying that, hey, I got these recognitions. So I think that everyday motivation is key when people are working so hard, right? But it's our job also as leaders to make sure that we don't take them for granted and we just don't keep throwing more and more work at them when you can't add more resources. So we've got to do a lot of different things, but the two key things I wanted to hit upon is helping prioritize, removing the hurdles, ensuring they have systems and processes to be most efficient and productive. And the second part of it is making them feel good about themselves on an everyday basis.
Wonderful. I think I want to pick up one thing from your message, that is removing the hurdles, right? So when you look at hurdles, again, one of the key factors is the silent killers in the productivity. Right? What are those silent killers in the productivity process? I think any of you can talk about it, of course.
So I think I've been fortunate enough to lead an organization right from zero revenue, and I think Dhruv will associate with that, to where we are a mature scale organization now. I think one of the, and we've spoken about quite a bit, so I'm not going to dwell on most of those, but I think one of the silent productivity killers is fatigue. Fatigue which comes in from teams who have been really hustling, working hard. And I think this fatigue is something which people don't really address, and teams, you know, get tired of, and then they start, you know, either dipping in productivity or they look elsewhere. And I think that's a ongoing process to find out. There's no one solution to address this fatigue, but I think it's important to acknowledge it with their teams, with the people, and customize the solution to what is that fatigue, why is it being created, and how is it that it can be mitigated, right? So there's no typical solution which can come in and say, okay, can I just give an award for it and the fatigue will go away, or can I just increase the salary or the fatigue will go away, or can I just change someone's role or the fatigue will go away? No, but I think it has to deal with that individual and how is that individual not being impacted by this impediment, which will then not bottleneck the entire process, function, or the organization. And it typically happens when a startup is from 0 to 10, and then from 10 to 100 when a startup has been doing a lot of good things, lots of clients, scaling up. That's when this typical bottleneck happens. And I think one needs to acknowledge it, which I think today in organizations are not acknowledged.
But how do you really identify the silent productivity culture? How do you identify? Addressing, of course, the second leg. How do you identify?
So we basically seen few things, right? In our company, previous companies. One is meetings. Okay. Like I talked about, we do reviews, but we try to time box them. It's a 1 hour review every week. The lesser time that goes in prepping for it, the lesser time that goes in spending time, in making your bosses happy. Okay. And this comes from the top, right? That like we're not sitting and playing email with each other, right? We're actually trying to, the impact is outside the building, not inside the building. I think that's very important. And it's important to be driven from the top, right? And sometimes as organizations grow, we don't realize what's happening across the organization. We don't realize the impact of some of our actions. When we were all sitting in one room versus now we have, 200 locations across the country. There are people distributed and you don't know how what you're saying is getting interpreted. One, definitely meetings. The other is this like intra-company communication, right? It needs to be more focused on driving impact, which is why I was saying earlier, right? Pushing on the metrics, saying here are the metrics that matter. Nothing else really matters. So let's focus on what is going to drive impact, right? And as you grow as an organization, figuring out the fatigue also sets in from doing grunt work. What is the boring part of my job that I can potentially automate, right? That I can outsource, that I can have a system do, right? Today we're in a world where a lot of things can be automated. I don't need to sit and scan through an Excel file when I can upload it on a chat GPT to do things, right? There is no joy in going to a collection center personally, right? When someone can just come home and do it, which is why we're seeing at-home services and all these growing. So fundamentally saying what tools are available out there that can enable me to do less grunt work so my daily work is more interesting. Because what drives people is actually their mental energy, and mental energy is fundamentally driven by doing something creative on a daily basis. If you repeat the same job on a daily basis, it gets tiring.
Great, I think.
If I could just
Yeah,
add,
please.
you asked the question about how do we get to know,
Yeah.
right? These silent hurdles. I think it's also about just hearing, right? Listening to your employees. As leaders, I do a lot of these focus group meetings with my employees without their managers. So I'll pick the same level people, but without the managers, and really talk about, hey, how is work? What's going well? What's not going well? And I think I push my leaders to do it. And every time I have a one-on-one meeting with my direct staff, one of the questions is, how's the morale? What is the team saying? And I always have these questions. They want to talk about business and issues, and I'll always ask about it. And when you ask, you communicate the fact that this is important, that we need to pay attention to the voice of the employees.
Great. I think but when you look at a larger organization, as Dhruv, you also mentioned right now, of course, the size is about 1,700, etc. But if you look at Sujatha's organization, it's much bigger. How do you ensure that people will speak up? Because most of the cases, they don't speak up. Let's say it's a fear, or it could be, I don't know, multiple factors. So how do you ensure that they speak up? And can there be any scenarios where the people at a lower level or a junior level can bypass their mid-level management and come to the leaders? So how do you guys look at, even from a learning standpoint, I want to hear from you.
No, I think that's the silent killer, right? The silence is a killer for all of us, to be very honest. The most important thing that at least we have tried to do it to have a couple of things that we have tried, and it's kind of working out well for us. One is creating a safe space where employees can come and talk without fear, without a language barrier, without keeping any restrictions. So I do something called as coffee session. We call set of people, we just, not the managers, but actually the people on the ground who do that, the real job. So we kind of come there, talk to them, understand what's happening. The second thing that we kind of do is the surveys. And we do very frequent surveys and take feedbacks. So because if you do not, and it's, for me, it's like and I keep going back to the education institution, we have class test, then you have unit test, then you have a media. So we keep doing it so that even if you get a sense of, and I think we are now mature to understand if there's any something serious that you need to address immediately, and you take action. So I think those two things has been working very well.
Great. Okay, when you look at the whole life cycle of any organization, of course, it starts from an early stage to a more matured organization, right? So, what should be the mindset of a CEO, let's say, of an early stage company versus a matured organization? So, how exactly you guys look at it? Let's say now, Shajai.
So, great question, Aravind, and I think some of us have addressed most of it. But I will say there are two parts to it. From an early stage, there's a lot of hustle, but I think it's important to acknowledge this one key facet, which is pivot. It's important for a leader to acknowledge a larger, broader vision, purpose, and a strategy to reach that purpose. But it's also important to acknowledge when to pivot when that strategy is diluted, and to be able to influence the pivot to a differential strategy, right? It's transparently with the team, and I think it's important that we can, for any leader to build trust with the team that what the new pivot that we are doing is going to really help us to reach where we want to be, right? And I think that's important at the growth level. When you're a mature organization, and I speak from experience primarily because we've led organization from zero revenue, early stage to maturity, is that there are the team or the leadership or the functionals who've actually been there from early stage may not have the vision to lead scale, or may not have the capability to lead scale. And that's a time when, the leader or the CEO or the board should know when to bring in newer talent who can lead you from, say, 10 to 100. So the 0 to 10 journey is different, and the 10 to 100 journey is different, right? So the ability, I'm not saying that everyone who's been there from 0 to 10 is not suitable from 10 to 100, but there are certain times when you need to bring in fresh outlook, fresh perspective. And I think that's very important. So addressing pivot, which I think is one of the core values, transparently, and the ability of the leader to influence the larger group. And at the mature stage, it's the ability to possibly, bring in fresh perspective, fresh leadership to address the 10 to 100. But I guess, yeah.
Great. I think I have a follow-up to Dhruv. How should the CEO behave? I'll tell you what. So the bigger you become, so the CEOs are generally invisible. So the smaller organization generally have more face time with the CEOs, right? So what should be the mindset of a CEO? For example, the moment you become bigger, let's say 1 billion company or a $2 billion company, should you be visible to your people? Should you have more interaction with your people? Or you think that you need to really have a wall between the people and you should be there only occasionally? So how do you address that kind of a situation?
I'll change the question a little bit. So as you become a large organization, yes, it is a fact that you get more removed from the ground. But the only way you can actually drive the strategy of the company is by knowing the pulse on the ground. So, and now what does ground mean? Ground means people who are in your organization. It means customers. It means all stakeholders that contribute in some way to your organization, right? So as you grow larger, you have to put systems in place for doing that. And I'll give you a few systems. For example, we talked about people speaking up, right? So in our all hands, we have a monthly all hands where we present to the whole company, what our numbers are, what the new projects, all of that. And we would open up for questions, and we would find that no one asked questions because there was too much pressure. We realized it was like 1,000 people listening to you. So then what we did was we made it anonymous, that people could ask questions, anything. And we put up those questions publicly, and people can vote anonymously, right? So one thing that it does is it gives us a pulse of what people are saying, and we are surprised to see some of the questions that come in. They question strategy, they question policies, they give ideas, and we openly discuss them. Whether we may disagree with them on it, but discussing them openly, that's one. From a customer perspective, we have something called a voice of customer. So as an organization, one of the things that we're proudest of is that we have maintained an NPS over 85. And honestly, that has been a big driving factor, like driving delight for our customers, right? But even that 15%, 15 points that we don't get on NPS, we try to understand what's going on. So we have a team called VOC, which is Voice of Customer, which basically looks at every non-positive feedback from a customer. It can be a neutral feedback or a negative feedback. They look at each and every feedback. They go deeply into analyzing what's going on. And this is the only team that sits next to both the founders. I mean, the rest of the floor is there, but like these folks sit next to us and they always have access to us. The other thing that we do is we've kept email. We have an email internally which anyone can write into. Even if they write in anonymously, we enable that. But basically, the more you empower folks, besides like, doing the surveys, doing your skip levels and all of that, the more you hear what's going on the ground. The last, of course, is talking to people, talking to customers. But that's the only way you can actually effectively drive an organization, because everything else otherwise comes to you highly filtered. And the further away you are, the more layers of filters that come in the middle, right? You really don't know what's going on the ground.
That's right, that's right. The conversation is very interesting, but I think unfortunately we have the time constraint. So I'll ask one last question to all the panelists, and then I'll just keep the floor for the audience question. What is one thing which is non-negotiable for you as far as the culture is concerned? All of you can answer quickly. The culture is concerned. What is the non-negotiable?
For me personally, because I'm in a government market, compliance, ethics and integrity is an absolute non-negotiable. Spend a lot of time working on that.
I think it's ethics. It's very important, and ethical behavior at every stage.
I think learnability, that's the primary stuff for me. I mean, of course, integrity is the number one always, but if person is not learnable, then it's very difficult to have somebody in the office.
One thing for us beyond ethics and accountability is actually what we call as a collaboration, right? Because what we realize is that the only way people are impactful is actually when they're able to collaborate. And lone wolves rarely operate well in a large organization. So one thing that we check for, we have a few values that we call Tiger in our company, but one of them stands for collaboration, and that's one of the fundamental things that we check for before we bring someone in. That's non-negotiable from our perspective.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant.